Welcome to Women in the Arts, the podcast that shines a light on those great women who participated in changing the world through culture.
Sweetheart, let's sit down and talk.
Gender.
Boys can do anything they want.
I'm Judy Chicago, and I'm an artist and a troublemaker.
Feminism.
I was always interested in drawing
Art.
The witch.
Witches.
A world in which I could wear whatever I want, say whatever I
It's
want.
important to connect feminist art with fashion.
Mode e colorism.
Women in the Arts. Hi everyone, I'm Karine and I'm here with Mathilde today. We are from the Master's degree in Cultural Project Management and we are going to talk to you about very important artist women who live in the shadow of men and more specifically of their husband. The artists that we choose to highlight are Margaret Keane and Zelda S Fitzgerald. You may already know a part of their stories, but today we aim to tell you more about them and to do them justice. I'll start with Margaret Keane. Margaret D.H. Keane, born Peggy Doris O'Keane on September 15, 1927 in Nashville, Tennessee, is an American artist. She produced a large number of paintings characterized by characters with big eyes. She is best known for her original portraits of children with oversized eyes. Her way of painting the female body is largely influenced by Amedeo Modigliani, and Keane's work can be seen as a prelude to the children and animals with the big eyes of Yoshitomo Nara. In reality, the big eyes that made her successful are a reflection of her own suffering. As a fervent believer, she was very attached to the teachings of the Bible, and her art was inspired by her grandmother.
Now, let me tell you about Zelda S. Fitzgerald. She was born in Alabama 1900. She was a very singular woman who loved to play the piano, to swim, to dance, and also to write. She was beautiful, audacious, and also quite rebellious and scandalous at the time. She is now known as a writer, even if her stories is a bit more complicated than that. She was also Scott Fitzgerald's wife. You may know this man as the writer of The Great Gatsby and many other books.
As we say, those artists lived in the shadow of men, and more specifically of their husband. Those two great women have different stories but quite similar injustice experiences. Let's see how it happened. In 1953, Margaret met Walter Keane. Both were interested in art. They quickly fell in love and married 2 years later in Hawaii. Walter then encourages his wife to sign with the name they share, Keane. In the years that followed, Walter would then pass himself off as the author of those works at exhibition and sales at the Hungry High Club in San Francisco. He was then in charge of marketing to ensure the sale of the canvases. Faced with the success of sales, he plunged into lies, inventing stories around the inspiration that provided him with the works. He will then be a victim of the criticism that characterizes him as heterogeneous, which does not prevent the growing success of Margaret's work.
But what happened? How come their stories are known today?
Well, when confronted to his lies by Margaret, Walter states that the works are easier to sell when they are made by a man. Moreover, his presence on the spot favors the sales since the public is happy to meet the artist. To calm his wife's fear, Walter asks her to teach her how to paint in her style. However, he lacks talent and is unable to do so and blames his teacher. He becomes an alcoholic and keeps Margaret in his workshop to force her to produce more. Out of tolerance and fear, she decided to divorce in 1965 and decided to go to court to prove that she was the author of the works. She moved to Hawaii. Then, in 1970, she married the writer Dan McGuire. She converted to the religion of the Jehovah's Witnesses in 1972 and publicly admitted that it was she, not her husband, who had painted all of the paintings on his behalf. During the 1986 federal court trial, Margaret challenged her ex-husband to prove that he was the author of the painting by painting a new one, and she painted one herself in front of the judge. Walter, however, refused to take the challenge, citing a sore shoulder. Margaret painted a piece of art in only 53 minutes, which allowed her to read the trial. After the judgment, she received $4 million in damages. Margaret was then again authorized to sign her work with her name. She now lives and works in Napa County, California.
And thank you, Karine, for telling us Margaret's story. On the other hand, Zelda dreamed about being a writer and was very good at it and very smart. However, she understood that her husband didn't want her to become famous because it was already his dream. Everything about her inspired Scott a lot, her intelligence, her creativity, her temper, and she became his absolute muse and also his main source of inspiration. For instance, he said many times that he married the heroine of his novels. They got married in 1920, which is also the year when Scott Fitzgerald released his book The Side of Paradise. We now know that a significant part of this novel was taken directly from Zelda's journals. He used her personality as an inspiration, but also her exact words. At first, she was quite happy about contributing to her husband's success. Scott became very successful and was often absent. Zelda got bored and decided to write more. Her husband didn't like that so much because his goal was to be the only writer of the household. He managed to make her think her work was not very valuable, while his was great, and he wouldn't let her publish anything before he corrected it. He even published some of her work with his name on it because only one of them could be famous. She recognized many times some part of her journals or letters in her husband's novel. He spent his life to prevent her from writing or from publishing her work so that he could use it for himself. A few years later, she got depressed and then was diagnosed schizophrenic. Scott used her once again to publish a book about mental illness called Tender is the Night, using the letters Zelda wrote him from the hospital. Zelda could use her loneliness to write an autobiographical book, but once again, it got corrected by Scott. There is no happy ending to that story except for the part that we now know Zelda's story and the great talent, and we can celebrate her.
To learn more in a fun way, these stories are the subject of 2 film adaptations. Tim Burton's Big Eyes, released in 2014, tells the story of the Keane couple. Margaret's role is played by Amy Adams, alongside Christoph Waltz in the role of Walter Keane. The artist herself makes an appearance in the first minute of the film, sitting on a green bench when the camera frames Amy Adams painting outdoors in front of the Palace of Fine Art in San Francisco.
The story of the Fitzgerald couple is told in the film The Beautiful and the Damned, released in 2018, and whose role of Zelda is played by Scarlett Johansson in a decor of the 1920s.
We would like to conclude this podcast with quotation of these 2 women that inspired us a lot and that we hope will inspire other girls and women listening to us. Margaret Keane said, "Stand up for your rights and be brave, and don't be intimidated." And we think it is very powerful and life-changing to live by this rule.
Zelda S. Fitzgerald said, "All I want to be is very young always and very irresponsible, and to feel that my life is on to live, and be happy and die in my own way to please myself." And that's the end of our episode. We hope you liked those stories. The message we wanted to share through them is that it is still very important today to give visibility and support to female artists, because we have been fighting for independence and legitimacy for a very long time, and this fight is still not over yet. It was Karine and Mathilde. Thank you all for listening.
Let's imagine equality through culture together.